Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. If you're still here after all that, you already know the kind of stories we tell. The kind that crawl under your skin, that echo in the quiet when the episode ends. If you want to carry a piece of that darkness with you, wear what haunts you. Our exclusive line of merch is made for listeners who feel more at home in the uncanny, the unspoken, the things that don't make sense in the daylight. Shirts, hoodies, and other gear, designed with that same atmosphere of dread, mystery, and whispered wrongness. Candles support the channel, feed the stories. You can grab yours at https://theshadowsprintify me, and as always, don't look behind you. I said the Wendigo's name on Livestream. I wasn't alone in the forest. The thing that heard its name, Chapter 1, He Who Speaks. The old man didn't blink when the recorder clicked on. He sat perfectly still in the dim trailer, arms folded over his chest, the skin of his hands dark and weathered like bark. The lines on his face ran deep, pulling toward his jaw like something had once clawed the youth out of him and left only warnings behind. Matt Lawn leaned forward slightly, holding his mic between them. The room was quiet save for the subtle wheeze of a space heater and the wind tapping lightly against the aluminum siding. "Just start wherever you want," Matt said, smiling. "Stories like this, oral histories, they matter." Joseph Talltree said nothing for a long beat. Then, "You carry stories different than we do." Matt adjusted his headphones. "What do you mean?" Joseph finally looked up, eyes like obsidian river stones, reflective, unreadable. "You carry them like things, collect them, feed them to others, but our stories they carry back." Matt's grin faltered. "You agreed to the interview. You said you wanted this on record." "I did," Joseph replied, "but not so you could clip it for your little screen, so I could warn you." Matt hesitated, then tapped his laptop to begin the waveform. Joseph cleared his throat once. "This one you don't repeat for clicks," he said. "This one you repeat because it'll hear you." Matt blinked. "Who?" Joseph's voice dropped low, like something old and dirt-packed beneath it. "The one that listens for its name." The room felt colder somehow, the wind against the trailer stilled. "We don't speak its name," Joseph continued. "Not unless there's a reason, not unless it's already too late." Matt raised an eyebrow. "But it's not real, right? I mean, it's a legend." "The Wend," Joseph's hand shot out, fast for a man his age. It gripped Matt's wrist hard enough that the podcaster gasped. "Don't say it." His voice had changed, raspier, frightened. "Even here, even now," Matt swallowed. "You think saying it summons it?" "No," Joseph said. "Saying it reminds it. You speak and it remembers you." A long pause. Matt sat back, eyes flicking to the recording waveform still rolling. Something in Joseph's words didn't feel performative, didn't feel like myth or folklore. It felt old, carried, like something passed down not for knowledge, but for survival. Joseph leaned closer. "There are places the wind won't go, places where birds won't sing. That's where it waits." "You mean it's territorial?" Matt asked, defaulting to logic. Joseph didn't answer directly, just said, "It has no shape until you give it one, no ears until you speak. That's how it finds you." Matt exhaled a quiet laugh, a little too loud in the tension. "And then what?" Joseph looked away, eyes glazing over like he wasn't really in the trailer anymore. "When it knows your voice, it wears it." The silence that followed was thick, heavy as packed snow. The recorder ticked on. Joseph finally stood and walked to the door of the trailer. "Delete your copy when you leave," he said. "Take my voice out of your machines." Matt frowned but nodded. As the door opened, the wind surged in briefly, and in it, for a single moment, Matt thought he heard something strange. Not the wind itself, but something moving inside it, like teeth in the air. And then the door shut behind him. The recording was still live when Matt looked at the screen, but it wasn't picking up his voice anymore, just a whisper. "We heard you." Chapter 2, The Setup. 3 days later, Matt stood at the edge of the boreal forest with a borrowed truck, a 30-pound pack, and a plan he'd rehearsed a dozen times in front of his apartment mirror. Alone in the wild. Episode 1, he muttered into his phone's camera, sweeping a panoramic shot of the treeline. "We're going full blackout. No backup, no crew, just you, me, and whatever the North decides to throw at us. He grinned, tried to look loose, professional, but there was a tightness in his gut that hadn't left since Joseph Talltree's trailer. Not fear, not quite. Something closer to imprint. The interview had gone semi-viral, spliced, clipped, overdubbed with creepy synths and shared across paranormal forums. But Matt hadn't uploaded the part where Joseph grabbed his wrist. That moment felt private, dangerous. Still, he knew the formula. Creepy local lore, isolated setting, a charismatic host willing to spend a week out where even GPS struggled. The numbers would be good, maybe really good. He made camp on a low ridge above a frozen lake, the wind slicing in from the west like it had a vendetta. Trees here didn't creak, they whispered, the kind of subtle leaf-on-bark sound that felt conspiratorial. By nightfall, the forest swallowed the sky whole. Stars vanished. His camphor crackled inside a dome of ink. Matt sat in front of the camera, adjusting his mic. Night 1. We're out here in the old territories, north of the reservation line, and I've got a story for you. He began to retell Joseph's tale, not word for word, but close. He mimicked the cadence, the shiver, the silence between warnings. Then, half smirking into the lens, he leaned closer and said it. Wendigo. No pause, no hesitation, said like a punchline, like a challenge. The trees went utterly still. The audio on his live stream popped, sharp and sudden, like a mic cable snapping. He blinked. Sorry about that, folks, he chuckled. We've been having weird interference since we crossed the tree line. Probably just my mic. Then came the comments. Dozens, maybe hundreds, scrolling in like a flood. What was that behind you? Something just moved. I heard a second voice. Say that name again. Matt reviewed the last 10 seconds of the stream. On screen, behind his shoulder, barely visible, something tall moved just inside the tree line. Not walking, just shifting. Recoiling like it had been caught watching. He paused the frame and stared. The body was too long, the neck too thin. No face, just the suggestion of one. He reached for the camera, then froze. Not because of what he saw, because the wind had stopped. And in that hush, something else began to rise. A sound not quite voice, not quite breath. A kind of whisper, so faint it almost wasn't there. And it was coming from the trees. Matt laughed nervously, playing it off for the stream. Okay, looks like we've got our first scare of the trip, he said. Classic creepy woods moment. Maybe it's the wind, maybe it's something else. But when he listened to the audio again, there was no wind, just a voice, speaking low, broken, and distinctly male. We know you now. Chapter 3. We're live. Matt barely slept. The forest doesn't go quiet like the city. It listens. It feels quiet. A hush that waits to be broken. Around 3:12 a.m., he gave up trying and dragged his laptop from its dry bag. The fire had long since gutted to coals, but the battery-powered lantern cast enough light for editing. His camera was still warm, like it hadn't stopped watching. He cued the stream's raw audio, dropped in his earbuds, and scrubbed back to the moment, the one where he said the word. Wendigo. At first it played exactly as it had live. Crisp, just him alone, flexing for an audience. Then the signal pop. Then something different. He slowed the playback to half speed. In the background, just as he leaned forward, came that subtle shift. A shuffle, like limbs dragging over pine needles. It wasn't the wind. It had shape, purpose, rhythm. Then a voice, not his. A whisper, deeper and wet, coated in static. We see you, speak it again. Matt yanked the earbuds out. He sat frozen, hands trembling slightly. The forest outside was deathly still. His breath steamed in the cold like a fog machine. For a moment, he considered packing up, heading out early. Then came the ping, a live comment alert. Even with no signal, he stared at it, blinking. Are you still out there? It's waiting. Say the name again. We want it to find you. Matt killed the lantern. Sat in the dark, letting his eyes adjust. He double-checked his router box. It was offline. No service bars. Satellite mode disabled. Still, the comments came, one by one. He turned on the camera again, against his better judgment. This is Matt Corbin, he said, his voice shaking a little. For those just tuning in, we might have picked up something real. The woods behind him stayed still. I know I made light of it last night, he said, glancing over his shoulder. But this story, the one the Cree elder told me, it wasn't just legend. He told me the name holds power. He swallowed. And I said it. He paused. I shouldn't have said it. The comments started again. Rapid fire. Dozens of them now, all repeating the same thing. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Then the feed glitched. Not a flicker, a full hard cut. The screen scrambled, flashed to black, then returned. Matt blinked. His own face stared back at him, distorted, elongated. A frame delay too slow to be coincidence. And over his own voice, a second one layered in out of sync, but familiar. You called. We answer. The camera turned off by itself. Matt sat in the dark. And for the first time in his life, he felt watched in the old way. Not digital, not spectral, predatory. Outside the tent, wind began to move again. But it didn't sound like wind. It sounded like breathing. Chapter 4, The Archive. Matt didn't sleep. He sat in his tent with a knife in his lap, not because he believed it would help, but because it gave his hands something to hold that wasn't a screen. Outside, the wind hadn't let up, but it wasn't the right kind of wind. It blew in one direction, then backtracked. It shuddered, pulsed, tasted the seams of the tent. He waited for sunrise. It didn't come, not properly. Just a dull ash light that barely shifted the color of the trees. Everything still looked like it was submerged beneath gray water. The sky didn't brighten, it thinned. The trees weren't still. They listened. He forced himself to open the laptop again, trying to regain control. Control of the narrative, of the logic of himself. Project folder. Cree Elder full interview WAV, timestamped. Clear. He'd cut it into segments for the podcast, but left the full file untouched. He hit play. I will not say the name. Why? Matt's voice, upbeat, too casual. Because it comes, because it listens, because the sound carries the scent. You're saying just saying it is dangerous. I am saying you already said it. He stopped. That wasn't in the original conversation. He knew it. He'd listened to this interview twice already when editing. The elder never said that line. Matt clicked back 5 seconds, replayed it. I am saying you already said it. His own voice answered, but quieter this time, distant. I didn't, I haven't. Then a third voice. You did, a whisper, somewhere beneath the audio, like it was burned into the magnetic core of the file. He checked the metadata. It had changed, modified, 3:17 a.m. Device, external input, unknown. He hadn't even had the laptop on at 3:17 a.m. The wind outside picked up again, louder now, scraping against the tent like someone dragging wet fabric across the nylon. Matt closed the laptop, not slammed, not shoved, just closed like that might end this. It didn't, because the whisper had followed him. Now it wasn't in the headphones, it was behind him. You brought it into the light, it knows you now. Matt turned, knife raised. Nothing there, just the slit of the tent, just the pale hush of dawn, just silence. You said the name where the wind could hear it. The wind remembers. He stumbled out into the open, heart pounding, the audio recorder clenched in one hand, still active. He tapped the side to reset it. It pinged. Playback mode, one new message. He hadn't recorded anything. The message began. He said it. He said it. He said it. He said it. His own voice, repeating, building, layered with dozens of others. Some male, some female. Some not quite human. Their cadence didn't match, like they weren't echoing each other but feeding off one another. He said it, so now he walks. Matt hurled the recorder into the trees. It didn't stop playing. Even after it was gone, the whispers came. From the wind, from the leaves, from the distant tree line. And in the unnatural silence between gusts, he heard something else. Footsteps. Heavy. Wet. Slow. Something was walking where the ground had no path. Something that knew the name. Something that knew his. Chapter 5. Memory trees. Matt followed no trail. There was no trail. He moved like a sleepwalker, just far enough ahead of his fear to pretend he had direction. The knife in his pocket felt heavier now, the handle sticky with nervous sweat. He didn't remember grabbing his boots. He didn't remember zipping the tent, but he must have. Right, behind him, the forest muttered. The further he walked, the more the woods began to look. Wrong. At first it was subtle, a cluster of trees growing in perfect equidistant circles. Then patches of moss that spelled out curling, root-like shapes he couldn't quite make sense of. A discarded fawn jaw snapped clean in half. And then, in the distance, metal. He caught it in a break between the branches, a glint of dead silver in the pale grey light. At first he thought it was a water tower, but as he drew closer, he realized what it really was. A cell tower, blackened at the base, cold to the touch. No lights, no solar panel. The ladder was rusted halfway up, like no one had climbed it in decades, and carved into the metal dozens of names. Each one scratched in jagged lines, some with years beside them, others just initials, but all of them shallow, as if whoever had etched them had been trying not to be heard. Matt found his hand reaching forward. There it was, near the bottom. M. Corbin, 2024. He hadn't written it, but it was his. The line beneath it had already been started, the first letter half finished. M. He stepped back, mouth dry. The wind began to shift again, not blow, shift. The leaves didn't rustle, they leaned, all in one direction, away from him. Then came the voice. "Where do you think you are?" Not from behind, not in front. Above, Matt looked up. There was something wrapped in the upper branches of a spruce behind the tower. Something strung between trunks like deer sinew, long, pale limbs hanging slack, breathless. Then it twitched. A leg dropped. Not human, not animal. A shape designed for forests and waiting. Matt turned and ran. The ground shifted beneath him, dry soil to peat, to something slick. The trees began to mirror each other, each root system a copy of the last. Every branch forked exactly the same. He was no longer in a forest. He was in memory pretending to be forest. The names followed him, carved not into bark now but into his sight. Every time he blinked, he saw one. Not just strangers now. People he knew, childhood friends, old subscribers. His brother's name. Then his own name again. Only now the date had changed. M. Corbin 2025 next to it, a word etched far deeper than the others. He called it. Chapter 6, Windfall. Matt didn't stop running until the trees opened up around him. He crashed down a steep ravine, scrambling over loose stone and rotted logs until his legs gave out beneath a dead cottonwood. The clearing was silent. Not peaceful, just stopped, like someone had hit pause on the world. Even the insects refused to hum. He sat there, panting, palms scraped raw. The wind was still. It had stopped following him, and that somehow made it worse. Then crackling, a sudden hiss like static igniting the air around him. Matt flinched, turning toward the sound. Just ahead, half buried in a ring of moss, was a CB radio. Not modern. Old. Vietnam era, maybe older. It looked like it had been wrapped in hide at some point, now rotted and curling at the edges, stitched together with sinew and what might have been fine hair. It was still on. A wire jutted from its side into the soil like a root. The dial glowed faint orange, and something was coming through. "Copy, repeat," he said it. He said the name, his voice. It was his voice, exactly, the same scratch, the same cadence, not a recording. Something repeating his intonation with just enough delay to make it feel alive. "This is Matt Corbin, broadcasting from static. ... Campground unknown. Something is out here. It knows me. It's speaking through the wind. Through, crackle shift, a new voice, not his, but trying to be. The flesh of trees, the roots of memory. I said it. I said the name." Then a pause, and from the speaker, "You shouldn't have." Matt jerked away as if struck. The wind came back all at once, a single gust that slammed through the clearing like a fist. The cottonwood above him groaned. Leaves rose straight upward, not outward. And beneath the howl, just audible, came a second voice, woven into the current. A child's voice. "You forgot the rules." The CB radio began to smoke. Matt lunged and ripped the power lead from the box, only to find there was no power lead. Just the fake cord, ending in a knot of knuckle-like bark, feeding directly into the ground. The smoke didn't stop. Not from the machine, from the earth. He stepped back as steam hissed from the cracks beneath the moss, and the shape of letters began to rise, burned into the soil. Fresh, searing hot. His name. Matt Corbin underneath it. You fed it. Now it's hungry again. Matt screamed. And for the first time, the forest screamed back. Chapter 7. The fire that whispers. The forest was chasing him now. Not with footsteps, not with noise, with silence. It closed in behind Matt like fog, a thick veil of breathless stillness. Even his own footfalls were muffled, as if the air was swallowing each impact, digesting it. He broke through a line of frost-streaked pine into a small, collapsed clearing and stopped. There, nestled into the edge of a rock outcropping, was a ranger outpost, half-rotted, roof-bowed with age. A faded forestry emblem hung crooked beside the door, letters eroded to ghost slashes. But the window glowed orange. Something was burning inside. Cautiously, Matt stepped through the doorway. The interior was sparse. Desk, cot, shelves caked in old dust and mold. Maps curled at the edges lined the far wall, though all of them had been scored through with charcoal X's. Every trail, every water source, every campsite. None were marked inland. At the center of the cabin was a stone hearth, and inside it, a fire that didn't behave like fire. It made no sound, no crackle, no pop, no wood hissing under the heat. Just flame, tall, slow-moving, pale orange like a dying star. Matt approached it, and that's when he noticed. His breathing was gone, not stopped, but stolen. He could still inhale, still exhale, but it made no noise. Even when he gasped, even when he spoke. Hello, nothing, not even the rasp of air. The fire flickered in response. Then it moved, it leaned, not flickered, leaned, toward him, like a flower drawn to light. And in its curve, Matt heard a sound not with his ears, but from inside his throat. A voice, not his own, using his body like a tuning fork. The wind brought you. He fell to his knees. You broke the silence. You fed the name. It heard you from under the ash. He clenched his jaw shut hard until his teeth clicked, but the voice kept using him. It's not a creature. It's not a legend. It's the memory of hunger. The fire bloomed upward, and in its light he saw faces. Not in the flames, in the stone surrounding it. Dozens of them, mouths open as if screaming. But like Matt, they made no sound. Just as he stumbled back, the wind outside slammed against the cabin walls. Wood groaned, dust fell, and the fire suddenly went out. Darkness. Then, breathing, not his, Matt turned. In the corner of the room, standing half-shrouded in hanging shadow, was a silhouette with too many joints. Its arms hung low, backward, its neck too thin to hold a skull. But it had one, a shape he knew. A deer skull, long and stained, with the jaw moving soundlessly over and over. It pointed to the ground. There, scrawled in soot, were 4 words, "Say the name again." Matt didn't. He couldn't. He ran. And behind him, the voice whispered from the dark hearth. Once was enough. Chapter 8, Dissonant Echoes. The storm was rolling in. Matt could feel it before he could see it, the pressure shift, the way the trees bristled like hackled fur. The wind had changed direction again, not random now, intentional, herding him. He ran until the forest opened into a gash of hillside where rusted towers loomed like skeletal giants. A relay station, old, state-run, maybe still live, maybe not. The antennas had collapsed into themselves, half swallowed by vines, but the main shack still stood. Concrete, steel reinforced, lights off but intact. The air around it buzzed faintly, not electricity, but magnetism, the feel of iron against the back of your teeth. Matt pulled the door open. The room inside was colder than the forest, cold like refrigeration. Audio reels lay in unspooled tangles on the floor, glinting like tapeworms in the flashlight beam. The walls were lined with monitors, all dark except one. It flickered, and then it played his voice. I know it sounds insane, but there's something out here. I didn't believe it either, but I think I've seen it. The thing with the skull. It heard me say its name. That was his live stream. He hadn't saved that. He hadn't uploaded that cut. Matt stepped closer. The footage looped again, only this time the words were different. Same voice, different intent. I gave it a name. That's how it gets through. I didn't know I was feeding it. Loop. Please, if anyone sees this, don't repeat it, don't even think it. Forget it, forget me. Matt's throat dried. His own voice had taken on a tremor, like a performance given under duress. A hostage tape. His eyes in the clip weren't his anymore. They watched the camera with something alien flickering behind them. He reached to kill the screen. Another one flickered on. This time it wasn't the stream. It was a recording booth, the inside of a soundproof studio, the kind with padded walls and a hanging mic. Matt was sitting in it, except he wasn't. The version on the screen wore his face, spoke with his mouth, but it kept repeating the name over and over again. Wendigo, 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 Wendigo. And with each repetition, the lighting in the booth changed, darkened, shifted, until finally, on the 13th repetition, the figure looked up and its face peeled away. Beneath it, bone, no eyes, just hollow pits, and the voice said, "I have his breath now, his tongue, I can reach you." The screen cracked from the inside. Matt fell back, smashing into a metal cabinet. Reels fell. The room filled with static, and somewhere in the wall behind him, a recording began to play, his voice again, but distorted, like it had been aged and warped by heat. The name is not just a word, it's an opening, a call, a shape you breathe, and once it's in the air, it's already inside you. Outside, the wind screamed, but inside, something else spoke from inside the monitor, not a recording, a live signal. "Say it again, Matt, or I'll let it speak through someone else." The lights died, and something in the walls began to breathe. Chapter 9, every echo is a door. The snow had returned by morning, but it didn't fall the same. It drifted sideways in long, slow spirals like ash, like something released from a mouth rather than the sky. The trees stood still. No birds, no insects. The whole forest was listening again. Matt hadn't slept. Not really. He'd fled the relay shack just before dawn, numb with fear, boots soaked and uneven on the frostbitten slope. Every time he tried to think about what he'd seen, the monitor, the mimic, the names spoken in his voice, the thoughts recoiled, twisted like a bruise you couldn't look at without flinching. But the world hadn't reset with daylight. It had worsened. He found the first message etched into the snow just before sunrise. "Say it again." It hadn't been written by hand. It looked wind-carved, each letter perfectly spaced, crisp, as if it had been pressed into the earth by sound. Matt staggered backward. A nearby pine shivered as if in response. His phone buzzed. He'd forgotten it was still on, still in his jacket, still running. He pulled it out and saw it was live. Stream in progress, 8402 viewers. He hadn't hit go live, and the chat was flooded. "Bro, is this a bit or? You okay, man? Blink if hostage, lol, you keep saying it. Stop saying it. Why is your mouth moving but there's no sound? Why does the background keep changing?" The feed showed Matt, but not from his phone. The angle was wrong, slightly off-center, like a third-person cam. The woods behind him weren't right either, blurred at the edges, like they were being guessed by something that didn't understand depth. Then came the voice. Do you see how quickly they listen? How quickly they repeat? It was his voice again, over the audio, but warped, slowed down slightly, like it had been run through melted tape. He ended the stream. Or tried to. The phone wouldn't respond. Not to touch. Not to power. It stayed on, even after he threw it against a rock and shattered the screen. It was still streaming. Matt fell to his knees. His breath came out in pale bursts, heart thudding against his ribs like an animal trying to escape. From the forest edge, a branch cracked. He turned. Nothing. No, wait, something new. A figure standing far back between the trees, tall, unmoving, wearing a hoodie just like his, wearing his face. And when it lifted one hand, he saw the fingers weren't fingers at all, but splinters of frozen air, trailing dust and static. It opened its mouth, and Matt heard his own voice say, "They remember you now. They won't forget. Every echo is a door." Chapter 10. Exhaustion. The ranger station wasn't on any map. Matt only found it because the wind stalled long enough for him to hear running water, a half-frozen creek that led to a disused fire trail, and eventually a crumbling sign. Northeast observation post, restricted access. He didn't care. By the time he reached the cabin, his lungs felt raw, throat ragged from breathing cold air that tasted wrong, like dust filtered through bone. He slammed the door shut behind him and bolted it with shaking hands. Inside, dust, moth-eaten maps, old equipment. A CB radio mounted to the wall, still wired into a solar rig that blinked faintly above the rafters. The only light came from a single red diode, a recording signal. Matt staggered forward, hit stop. The tape deck clicked and rewound itself. Click. "This is Operator 3, Ranger Outpost 17. I've initiated emergency channel lockdown. Something's interfering with the net. Last night, the radio started playing something on loop. A voice. Familiar but wrong. It said. The transmission ended in a burst of static. Matt fumbled to eject the tape. Another one was already in the tray. Labeled in black marker, February 4, 1999, do not play. He hit eject again. It refused. Instead, the tape started on its own. He said the name. Now we remember. The ones who breathe. The ones who listen. The ones with mouths. Matt backed away. The words weren't spoken. They were chewed, broken apart, whispered backwards and inside out. But it was still his voice. And beneath it, something older. Like a voice dragged through fire and glass. Mimicking, learning. He shut off the radio. It clicked back on. Then the VCR on the nearby shelf began to whir. The monitor beside it, a CRT so old it hummed like a beehive, flashed blue. Playing. Winter Safety Brief, 1996. The screen showed a ranger giving instructions on how to survive hypothermia, but the lips didn't match the voice. The words coming out were his own, from the stream. Don't say the name, don't write it, don't play anything that sounds like it. It doesn't live in words, it lives in air. Matt screamed and unplugged the monitor. It kept playing. Now every screen in the cabin flickered on, monitors, radio decks, the ancient emergency alert panel. Each one spoke in his voice. Some whispered, some chanted. Others repeated only one thing: you made it real. You gave it a name, now it wears your voice. The windows fogged, but not from cold. Something was breathing on the glass from the outside. Matt turned to the door. A face was pressed against it. His face, but wrong, eyes black, skin too smooth, like something wearing a stretched-out memory of him. Then came the screaming. Not human, not one voice, all the voices. Thousands of his own scream crashing together in a wave of broken sound, feedback shrieking like it had teeth. Matt dropped to the floor, hands over his ears. It's in the archives now, in the signal. It knows how to spread. It doesn't need forests anymore. The screaming stopped and was replaced with a low, hissing breath, a final whisper. Now, say it again, one last time. Chapter 11, Archive of Breath. The radio towers in Alberta went dead 2 nights later. No storm, no interference, just silence. At first, they thought it was a solar flare, a routine blackout. Then came the reports, not from broadcasters, but from listeners. People calling in from rural homes, claiming they'd heard breathing across the FM band. Long, ragged, wet breaths. Some said it was like an animal dying. Others said it sounded like their own breath, played back through static. In Kansas, a woman woke screaming from a dream where she watched a YouTube video on mute. The man in it looked right into the camera and moved his lips, and though no sound played, she knew what he was saying. When she tried to remember the word, her mouth went dry. Her nose began to bleed. She wasn't a subscriber. She didn't know Matt's name. In a college dorm in Oregon, a philosophy student was transcribing field interviews when the audio garbled. She paused the tape, rewound. What came through was a whisper. You heard it once. You remember. The timestamp was from 3 months before the live stream. None of them had any connection, except for one thing. They all described the same dream. A man sitting by a campfire, alone. The trees surrounding him are perfectly still. He doesn't speak, but something else, something just behind him, leans forward and speaks through him. And every time it says the word, its mouth gets closer to yours. Matty was no longer in control of his own story. His videos deleted, his channel locked, but still the streams played. Old uploads began to reappear on new accounts, channels he'd never made, footage he'd never taken, but all with his voice saying that name again and again. Backward, forward, layered. He'd smashed every phone, destroyed every SD card, even tried burning an old laptop. But it didn't matter. He wasn't uploading anything. It was, somehow, somewhen, the Wendigo, or whatever the entity truly was, had rooted itself in the idea of speech itself. In playback, in repetition, not alive but archival, like a thought with claws. He'd become its vector. And now it no longer needed him, just the echo of him, just enough to remind people of the sound. If a name is remembered, it breathes. Matt sat alone in a hospital parking lot, eyes hollow, hands covered in gauze from trying to claw the last pair of earbuds out of his ears the night before. He hadn't slept in 3 days. His breath fogged against the glass. In the window's reflection, he saw himself blink, but he hadn't blinked. The version of himself in the glass leaned forward and began to speak. Chapter 12, How a Name Eats. Matt had come full circle, not to the campsite, but to the idea of it. A memory, half-rotted, taped together with old Livestream fragments and whispers that no longer needed a mouth. He hadn't spoken aloud in days. Not since the incident with the mirror. Not since his reflection tried to finish his sentence. His vocal cords burned now with disuse, his throat raw from biting back coughs, sneezes, anything. He was afraid the wrong sound would say it again. He didn't trust his own voice. And the Wendigo, if it was that, was learning. No longer did it need forests or silence or cold to reach you. It only needed bandwidth, an echo chamber, a warm human mind full of language. If a name is remembered, it breathes. If it is spoken, it feeds. Matt remembered what the Cree elder had said in that first interview, but there was more, something he hadn't understood at the time. And if it feeds too long, it becomes you. The stream, the final live stream, was titled Ending the Sound. No thumbnail, no facecam, just a black screen. Viewers flooded in by the hundreds, then thousands. They expected a hoax, a confession, a joke. Instead, they heard breathing, not his. The sound was wet, close, just behind the mic. A slow inhale, then static. Then a sentence. To forget a name, you must lose the tongue that said it. Matt's voice, barely a whisper, cut in. It's not just the sound, it's the shape of it. The curve of thought it lives inside. I thought if I never said it again, it would die. But it doesn't need sound, it needs audience. There was silence. And then, from far away, another voice answered. His own. I'm still here. The black screen flickered. Viewers began reporting odd things, phones locking, laptop microphones activating. Someone claimed their speakers whispered the word even after closing the browser. Someone else said their dog barked at the monitor and wouldn't stop. Then, without warning, the screen flashed one final image, a forest, Matt walking alone. Behind him, a shape made of antlers and teeth barely visible. Then nothing. The aftermath, the channel was gone the next morning, wiped completely. Not banned, just absent, like it had never existed. But the footage, it didn't stop. Clips re-uploaded under new names. Threads dissecting every whisper. AI filters enhancing the breathing. Podcasts speculating whether it was ARG, malware, mental breakdown. And still, people clicked. And still, something listened. You made it back for now. But the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch. They wait. And perhaps they remember you now, too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video. Subscribe. But know this. Some doors once opened do not close so easily.